Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We talk about culture, politics, news, business, and I'm here with my co-host, Ann Zeta. How goes it this week?
It's been a little hot, I have to say, but it goes pretty well.
I know you were already talking about how you need to fly and get on a plane to run from this heat.
Yes, I'm going to visit my family in Santa Barbara in a couple of weeks, so I'm looking forward to that because it is too hot here. I don't even bother to go outside when it's not even that hot because I just anticipate it's going to be too hot, and so I miss the brief moments when it's below 80 degrees that I could actually go outside, and it's making me a little depressed.
Yeah, I'm a big nighttime, like when it's like 90 at like 10 at night. I actually like that weather because I was in like 110 all day, so it feels like 80.
Or sometimes when you're inside and you get chilled from the air conditioning and you step outside and it feels like such a relief, you think, oh, I could go for a walk, which is what I did the other day. And I got about 2 blocks away from my house and I said, this is not going to work. And I turned around and I went back home because I had already heated up.
Exactly. Well, we're getting closer. We're into August now. And, shout out to all of you who are here because really what me and Ann were talking about is like, man, these last couple of weeks, and really this podcast is based on what goes on in Fort Worth and like what news happens. So when it's election season, this is very easy. Or if there's a hot topic, it makes it very easy. But then you got weeks like this week, maybe even last week.
Or the whole month of July when the council goes on vacation. And I think a lot of staff members take vacations. So things having to do with the city, quote unquote, slow down a little bit, I think, in July.
Yeah. So, but we have, I think, a very dominant, very good episode this week. It's titled Who Needs to Be Heard in Fort Worth? And we're really just going to talk about voices that we think are not being heard or not getting the respect or support that maybe it needs to in the city. The first one we're going to talk about is the Mayor Book Challenge. We know and remember that the Pride Badge is a part of the reading challenge, but Mayor Maddie Parker got emails about people not wanting that Pride Badge, so she then removed it. Even greater amount of people, because I think it was less than like 30 emails that got her the first time. So a group of other people who supported the Pride Badge came into city council, wrote letters, social media, all that. And Mayor Maddie Parker said, no, I'm going to keep my decision how it is, keep it removed. Now she just recently kind of did a interview. Tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm not sure if it was a WFFA direct interview where she looked like she gave them time. And what we have now is direct emails to the city manager, David and Cook, and then as well as other emails along the way, and her kind of new updated decision, how she feels like she still is sitting firm on what she did and that decision was correct. This article also highlights a queer bar owner. Well, she was a queer support bar owner of Liberty Lounge, talking about her book exchange at her bar. And anyways, this just got brought up, and I think is an example of voices could not be being heard currently in Fort Worth. And I know this has been a long journey with this challenge.
Yeah, we talked about this previously, and I actually didn't expect it to come back up again. So I was surprised by this interview with WFAA, and it was an interview and an article written off of the interview. It did provide some additional information that I had not been aware of previously, and that was that the library staff themselves had received about 8 inquiries from parents who were not positive about there being an optional Pride Badge. And they wrote to city staff, I guess the mayor and council and city manager's office to share with them how they were planning to handle that. And from the emails, it looks like how they were planning to handle that was to respond to these 8 inquiries to inform them that it was an optional Pride Badge. And so therefore they could opt not to do it. And I think that could have been the end of it right there. But that's not exactly what happened. So I think that there was then some response because it had the mayor title on it from our mayor, indicating that she was not aware of the details of it, but it had been a Pride Badge, I think similar in years past and had not caused a problem at all. So to our topic of who is heard and who isn't heard, there, I think, are decisions being made in cities every day that are based on who speaks up. And so I think that leads to us to understand that there's an importance of speaking up when you have opinions about things that are being offered in our city.
More than 2,000 people signed a petition to have the badge reinstated, but that still, based off the report, shows she's still unsure of what she will do the following year. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, this badge was here when Betsy Price was also mayor. This Pride Challenge badge was
I believe it's been in there the last 3 years, so I think that would have been the first time it was possibly before our current mayor. But I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, and I think this is an example of a lot of times people listen to this pod for us to stand up for things. And I think, it's a battle, especially with something like this book challenge, where it caught hold by a small group of people who then raged about it, but it could have slid under the radar for
2 years.
2 years, which then did good in the world to give a diverse book challenge perspective. And so, there's things that I feel like we talk about offline that we don't want to talk about online, and it's simply because we want to protect things like a book challenge that has a pride badge in Fort Worth, something that seems positive, but if we brought it up, now it will be an enemy and a target. And I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges about advocating for LGBTQ spaces and their safety and their support and their initiatives. How do you feel about that take?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I kind of said to you earlier when we were kind of hashing through what we were going to talk about today, that if we bring things up and put a target on them, then that could make things that exists in the community that are wins, that are, inclusive and accepting and providing support for marginalized communities. It could put a target on them and make folks who have other opinions that might not be what we agree with to seek them out and try to have them not be available. And I mean, we talked about the market and why are people wanting to exclude certain people from our community, and I find that hard to understand. But again, I don't want to not talk about the important things. Yeah. So it's a struggle to figure out what can we talk about and help get more support for, because people tend to not speak up for the things that they're for. Mm-hmm. They come and speak when they're upset about something and the things that they're against. And my whole way of being is to try to be positive and proactive and speak into being and support things to happen instead of having to dissolve into, battles about things after the fact. So, but if we don't talk about these things that people can stand up and support, then when somebody does decide to put a target on them, they can be lost easily because there's not a ready and available group of folks to stand up and say, oh, but I'm for that. I'm supportive of that. Yeah.
No, and I think this is also where I empathize with our mayor in the sense of you are a millennial, female. I would say you are a more centrist conservative in my view of you and how you have ran the city, how she runs the city. And so I feel like she has to navigate knowing that she has a city like Fort Worth that's becoming more progressive, where I think she can get closer to things, but then she has that really, really conservative group here in Texas that then she also has to manage if she continues to want to be elected here in the city, maybe even the county. Like, look what happened to Betsy. Right? It's this very fine balancing act for them.
And even she ends the interview by saying that moving forward, the most important thing we can do is have these conversations, and that she's been having numerous conversations with people. And I think that's true. I absolutely agree with that. But she also says, whether you wish it could or not, the badge is not going to erase any kind of vitriol or hatred or concern or disagreement about someone's lifestyle. And to me, it does provide a signal to folks that this is a welcoming community to them. So while it might not change the mind of someone who has a hostile opinion of somebody who has that lifestyle, it will make someone who has that lifestyle see this community as welcoming to them. And I think that is of benefit.
Yeah, 100%. I am there with you. And I think the part that was interesting is a lot of this happened before, when she was on vacation or out of the country, and there was a quick response around what she wanted. And so now this emails to me bring it up that it wasn't even the emails that really impacted her. She was already proactively possibly concerned of what this could look like for her constituents on the conservative scale. And maybe she just reacted really quickly, because it says, she kind of went how she was furious and how she kind of said this program was developed before me looking at it. She said it had her name on it. And she's like, basically, I don't think this is an appropriate space to have these conversations. But then, like, before we got all these emails, she was very much like, this is just a challenging thing and we need to be open and be more thoughtful about it. But to me, the email showed that this could be her actual beliefs. And that would be concerning to me, if this isn't her trying to protect herself as a politician, or did we see some true ideology views of our mayor that I would be concerned out for a city that's dominantly majority progressive, that if our mayor does feel like off of her own gut, this was inappropriate, before she even got all those emails. Because she even said she didn't hear about the uplash from others when making this decision. So that to me actually is even possibly more concerning. But I agree with you that we have to be able to create spaces for everyone to be seen. And that to me is when you start boxing people out, that is something that I will always be against. And yeah, so let's go ahead and go to the next story and group that we feel like have been unheard, who's not being heard. And I don't know if all of you have seen this conversation, but it's the conversation with the Metroplex Atheists, a nonprofit group who is suing Fort Worth, claiming that the city violated its freedom of speech. The group applied to hang banner ads downtown for an August 26th event on keeping religion out of public schools, but got rejected after the city claimed the event was not of sufficient magnitude, according to the press release. The ads are hung on light poles owned by the city of on Throckmorton, Main, Houston Street, managed by the downtown advocacy nonprofit Downtown Fort Worth, Inc. And so I guess the executive director of this nonprofit, Amir Khan, kind of said that we did everything to meet the city of Fort Worth's banner policy. We were denied purely on trumped up claims nowhere in the policy to disguise their prejudice, saying that this was not of magnitude, but they gave other excuses, so they weren't consistent with why they weren't given the opportunity to do this.
Well, they did it back in 2019, so I think that's part of the confusion. They approved those banners. They had some banners that were approved for an event that they had back in 2019, and I don't think there was such a hurdle to overcome as to the size of the event that you were having. Yeah. There were some upset folks when those banners went up as well. And I think that there was a response from Mayor Betsy Price at the time indicating that, while you may not agree with what was on these banners, that it was a matter of free speech and that they could be displayed in downtown. And she didn't support the message or agree with the message. And she said that while many of us may not support or agree with the message, the organization did follow the policies and procedures that were set forth, and we must respect the freedom of speech. And they, that was right before the 4th of July, so there was a lot of consternation about that, but that is where it landed.
I feel like that approach could have worked well for Mayor Parker for the book challenge, something like that as well. Like,
yeah.
Hey, schools are for a diverse group of thought. People are here to, parents are here to educate their kids in all different capacities. We have to be open to all family types and values.
So I don't know if you're looking at a different article that the Fort Worth Star Telegram did an editorial on this saying that it probably would have been better to just say yes in this instance.
Yeah.
And avoid a long-term trouble for the future with this lawsuit that now has been filed.
The Metroplex atheists are also just kind of confused because other religious groups or other groups who felt like fell in that religion category got time or were able to do
those banners often reflect conferences that are happening in the convention center, and those sometimes are associated with different religious groups as well. So I don't think you can regulate content when you allow signage.
Yeah.
That's where you get into a tricky situation. Yeah. So this is not necessarily regulating the specific content. It's just saying this group doesn't get to put up banners with any content at all. So I think that's where they've run into a bit of an issue.
Yeah, because to me, right, I believe, going back to our Mercy Culture people, I think they had a big conference or has a conference coming up downtown. I'm thinking, like, did they get banners, or is that something that's going on? They're, selling out the downtown Fort Worth Inc. for like a big convention center. I'm interested to see like what other things happen there, right? It's such a niche place. So many different conventions, from anime to religious organizations to political organizations, go down there.
And I think in the past, when we had some controversy coming out of the state about doing some laws that were seeming to be anti-LGBTQ, our local Visit Fort Worth group went out of their way to put messaging in downtown to make it clear to folks that everyone was welcome in Fort Worth, and even did a whole ad campaign about y'all means all. And that was emblazoned on the sidewalks and all of that around the convention center to make it very clear that everyone is welcome in Fort Worth.
Yeah. I can see, the signage literature having to be, I don't know if that's a committee or like if you would have but I can see something like "In No God We Trust" sign be very steel manning the argument from the other end. Is like, I can see how that'd be a very dramatic messaging to a lot of people in the city that really freaks them out, especially when your Constitution says "In God We Trust" and all that stuff. Like, I could see them like, even if they just would have came with them, it's like, hey, we're here to support your event, but we feel like you have to. It's kind of like our pod, right? We can't say the craziest title, Mayor Maddie hates gays, and put it in a pod for we can get clicks and like do that stuff. And I feel like this "In God We Trust" thing, is a very big punch in the face just on banners. And so if I was a marketing director or a supporter of this org, I would say, like, personally, if I was a city person, to me, that's the part that I could see the revision being on the banners itself, because it is a.
But again, I think the law doesn't allow them to have input on the words that go on the banner. So it's a matter of, if you have a program that is available, then people can put on there what they will, as long as it doesn't violate, I don't know, certain things. But telling them what to say and what not to say, I don't think is part of the equation.
Yeah, so that's like, I think you're seeing this social media. This has even happened on social media platforms with freedom of speech.
And I think a lot of people think of those banners as being a voice of the city or a voice of the downtown organization, and that's wherein the problem lies. Exactly. You have to educate folks that these are words coming from whatever organization is sponsoring this event. It is not the city saying this. It is not Downtown Fort Worth Inc. saying this. This is the organization that is sponsoring the banner, and that information is on those banners too. They have to identify the event that is occurring.
Yeah, I don't know how this goes, but I can see the difficultness on the city side. And so.
But I think the editorial ends by saying, on this, we think it would have been better to err on the side of more speech, not less. And I would tend to agree with that 100%. Editorial comment.
And that's the Star Telegram, which we don't usually say that about their opinion pieces. So, let's keep going. So let's go ahead and move into the Texas A&M. All right, so that's the next one that is around unheard. There's been two stories. So Texas A&M recently suspended a professor for allegedly criticizing Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick during a lecture about the opioid crisis. The probe has free speech advocates concerned about the political influence over academia in Texas. Joy Alonzo, a clinical assistant professor of pharmacy, nearly lost her job for a remark she made while delivering a lecture at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston in March. The investigation failed to prove the professor did anything wrong. She was allowed to keep her job. This is on top of the president, the university president, just lost her job because of switching with a journalist they were going to hire to elevate their journalism program. But then after complaints about that journalist working for the New York Times and had a lot of DEI work, somehow her package from A&M changed. And so that really also created a lot of concern for free speech and what kind of voices we're protecting in Texas A&M. I can stop here. You can add in.
So I hadn't read all of the articles, but I did see this flare up and was curious when I saw that there was a faculty Zoom meeting where faculty from Texas A&M had a meeting to discuss specifically the hiring of the journalism department head and then the change in the package and then her declining to take that job. And then the president was on that call as well. And so I watched way more than I probably should have of just a lot of professors expressing concern about how this put a taint on the reputation of the university, because I think they were very poised to elevate this journalism department and have it be very robust, and a lot of people were excited about her coming, and the president even expressed in this Zoom call with faculty about that she was excited. They had a celebration with balloons that was repeated numerous times during the Zoom. A celebration with balloons was held. So how in the world did this happen? The package originally was tenure upon arrival, but then there was something about how that had to be approved. So I'm not sure where the miscommunication was, and at the end of that 2-hour faculty Zoom meeting, which I watched the whole thing, I was still not sure. And I think many of them were not sure as well.
Yeah. And so that is Texas A&M recruited Kathleen McElroy, who is a distinguished journalist and A&M alum, which was also crazy. Like, she is an alum. And they kind of backed out on her.
The funny thing is the president said in that meeting that original offer was still on the table. And so what I was believing by the end of that Zoom meeting was, and I haven't caught up since then, and it's been a little while, a few days have passed, and it may have changed since then, since the president has now stepped down. But when she was still there, she was saying that is still in existence. And so faculty members were asking, should we be reaching out to her to tell her we would still like her to come? Yeah. But I think that ship has probably sailed.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other big part here is the reason why, and I've said this for a long time on the 817 pod, my concern of the elevation of Texas A&M downtown Fort Worth is when I look at the voices who win are the voices who operate on the conservative stack. I don't see stockyards or rodeo or all that industry. I don't see them have to deal with messaging or not getting enough. You know, and I look at Texas A&M being such a partner to Fort Worth because I think in hindsight, as one of the largest and legacy-built conservative higher ed institutions, it really fits Fort Worth's current themes and style, where I would have much rather had personally the University of UTA style, a more that support and partnership.
They have a presence downtown too.
Yep, an MBA program right there. So I guess for me, it's like, I was concerned about what voices and what branding would A&M bring. And so, like, even though this isn't necessarily Fort Worth, this happened in Galveston, this happened with a professor for College Station. But the fact that, you know, John Sharp, the chancellor of Texas A&M Systems, who has been working really closely with Betsy Price and the rest of the team, John Goff, that to me, his direct connection and communication to Dan Patrick, and how a first-year medical student can file a complaint, and that Patrick could text you immediately, and like in 4 hours of saying this professor's already in trouble. Like the fact that it moved that fast is just showing, like, to me, how involved state leadership is in our academic institutions as well. And that is something that I feel Texas A&M needs to have a internal assessment on, like, that relationship.
Well, it's kind of like we were talking about before about the importance of being able to have conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly this is has a chilling effect on having conversations if you think that something like this could happen because you express an opinion. Yeah. And I remember going to college, it was a while ago, but being able to have conversations about things that people believe in and think is part of that experience. Yeah. And I sometimes would bring in, play the devil's advocate and bring in opinions that were not the common opinion amongst the majority of the people that I was in class with, just to have a more spicy conversation. Yeah. So I just, the chilling effect part, I think, is a problem. I think that, whenever there's electeds involved, you can get open records requests, you can ask for these communications. And so these things can all come to light, and you always have to keep in mind, would you want what you're saying to be on the front page of a newspaper? Mm-hmm. And I think that if someone should be able to file a complaint if they have a concern. Yeah. But I think that it needs to, like you said, how quickly this kind of
and then that you jumped, like, this Dan Patrick said jump, and then you jump and you like respond with no like, yeah, we have a policy for this, Mr. Patrick. Well, I'll let you know how it handles. No, you just jumped in and said, yes, I'll listen to you. I mean, that is very, like, as someone who loves, like, The Economist, that is very stuff like you often see in different countries that have not democracies, don't get the freedom of having people and a melting pot of voices. We're able to have this podcast because we live in a country that allows us to have and challenge thoughts and state messaging. That's just the scary part, is like Texas plays as this, like, we don't want to be, we're free and no one's the boss of us. But this is very much like state ownership, state kind of propaganda messaging. If the state can stop you or tell you to do something and you respond that fast, that is just, to me, the scary part of the A&M piece, especially as they're building the downtown stack of Fort Worth, as we become more diverse as a city, as that area is in a very diverse spot. If you're at the top of your institutions blocking diverse voices, what are you doing as you build infrastructure in a place that is diverse? These things go hand in hand that we have to be intentional and aware about. And I think that's for all businesses that build anywhere, that what are their bias or their subconscious things that they may not know that they're doing. Because when you're a legacy organization like A&M, there's so much where this was just maybe Mr. Sharp, he knows Dan really well because of his past experience, just doing a response for someone he respects. But what it comes off is like, you just kissed a ring.
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful. I mean, it's not bad to have relationships. Yeah. Like, I've been in office. I have relationships with other people who continue to serve in office. And I would hope that they would have respect for me, that if I reached out to them about something, but I wouldn't want them to do an extra favor for me that they wouldn't do for other people. Yeah. So I think that relationships are important and having connections are important. But I think that, those all need to be handled carefully and make sure that people are following good practices.
Yeah, and I think another fear of this too is just like the state. Like I know there's other state like Yolitics, and there's another great one out of Houston. The guys in Houston where they do state podcasts around what's happening at the state level. But even like the Death Star bill that was for businesses, if you remember, where it was about cities can't change or create regulations beyond what already exists in Texas law. And so like places like Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas are like, we have a lot of different policies and rules so that we can build a way that's meaningful to our communities. Now those look like to not matter with this new House Bill 2127. And we have, I know the article that it got introduced to me on was about how Fort Worth will not be hit by this Death Star because we already have a lenient policies to businesses and building in the city. But to me, that's another fear of the state overstepping or the state creating their versions of Texas in places where we believe in a localized government.
Yeah, I think that they've done a lot of jumping to the state when they get frustrated with what the cities have done locally. And this is something that's been going on for years and years and years. It was very much a Texas way of doing things was local control. And so many places have put into place regulations that are supported locally, and they have voted on them, and locally the communities have said, yes, we want you to regulate this. And I think the state having a reputation of being a low regulation state has been a little irked by this. And so they have kind of overcorrected and come in and said things. I mean, we had a representative previously, she's not in office anymore, who said that the cities just basically are at the whim of, they wouldn't even exist without the state. And I think that there's a balance there. I think that there are some things that should be regulated statewide. I've been down to Austin numerous times to talk about speed limits in neighborhoods, because I think all neighborhoods should benefit from people driving more slowly in them so that you are safer. Yeah. And the state already regulates that. They have a prima facie speed limit for neighborhoods, and it's 30 miles an hour, which is too fast, in my opinion. I've been down there 4 legislative sessions, and we still haven't made any progress. Well, we have made progress, but we have not accomplished that goal. So I think that this is pointing out cities that have put in place regulations that are supported locally that the state believes is overreaching but the example they give about how if you're a HVAC company that serves businesses up and down 35, and some cities have certain regulations and others don't, that could be confusing. Yeah. I mean, I guess that gives a leg up to a local business, and maybe you want people to support local businesses that understand all the regulations that apply locally. Yeah. So I haven't dug into the details of that, but it seems like there are, I think, some things that should be regulated statewide, and there are some things that I think the cities need to have some ability to cater to their community, because Texas is a very big state with a lot of different communities.
To me, a Death Star kind of concept could make sense in that example, because if it's like a state contract or a contract where it is a multi-city contract kind of infrastructure thing, I don't know the whole depths of it, but seeing that side of that challenge can make sense. But limiting what things that, if there is a business or an infrastructure being built and it's solely being built in one county in one city, and they want to do something different than what the state wants to do, I feel like that is, the state shouldn't impact what regulations they want if it's only influence in their city. But I do understand the HVAC kind of concept if you're now playing on multiple cities in Texas.
But I'm not sure how I feel about like wages earned. Yeah. And that sort of thing, because if you have a city that wants to put in a regulation that pays a higher wage, that would attract people to come to your city too, and maybe that's an economic development thing for your city. If you want to make sure that people are being paid a living wage, and clearly the state minimum wage and federal minimum wage is not a living wage, and many places have done some work in that arena. So people just have to jump back and forth and try to get somebody to do something to make things better. And I think that can be frustrating. Yeah.
But I think overall, like, my opinion here is like businesses also operate on the conservative stack. Like, I'm just a believer. It's like when it aligns with everyone wants to say all voices are heard, or y'all means all, or we're all thinking about everyone. But when you break it down, business, it booms in Fort Worth. We do really well. I think Maddie Parker has been a great economic mayor, but it's also because it plays on a stack that allows her to run really fast. Where when it doesn't operate, stockyards and all that stuff plays on the stack that we already exist. But when you're trying to challenge the stack, a la, atheist views and God in schools or LGBTQ community, wow, now it feels very difficult. Now it feels very hard. But there's some things that just, when it aligns, it's able to be heard. And I think that's where, like, who needs to be heard in Fort Worth, or is Fort Worth still a small town? In my opinion, we are, because it is all the things that Fort Worth gets to bully to the top that then makes these marginalized voices get can't even have a book badge, like it's something really small, but yet, businesses can go build something crazy without really thinking in the middle of a field. So it's just like,
and I've been here quite a few years, but I think that to back to our question at the top of who should be heard, I think in every city, everyone should be heard. Now, are we going to do everything that everyone says? No, but I think that there should not be barriers to being heard. And I think that's something that we're working on doing a little better. And I think in every community, you're going to have people who've been there for a long time and know who the people are and know how to contact people that they need to contact and have a relationship already. So I hope that those things are not used to keep other people from.
No, 100%. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move into wins and losses. We start with our losses and then we do our wins. We do this every week for the city. Usually we do 3 short stories, 1 big story. Today we did like more of a theme, and we had these 3 stories that we just wanted to highlight around voices and start the dialogue of who is being heard in Fort Worth, and making sure everyone can be heard and feel seen in Fort Worth. So let's go ahead and start with our losses so we can end on the positive. What is your loss?
So I was struggling back and forth right up until this very moment. So that means I may not be able to decide just one of these 2 things that I was kind of wrestling back and forth with about whether it was a loss. There was an article in the Star-Telegram about introducing new journalists at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And I think that's fantastic. More journalism, more folks looking at stories in the city and sharing is absolutely not a loss. But I think we have lost some really good people over the years that have worked at the Star-Telegram, who had been here for several years and put a lot of energy and effort into building a rapport with folks and building up their public trust with people and bringing us some really kind of hard-hitting stories that were super important, who are no longer with the Star-Telegram. So just seeing this whole group of 5 new people, I feel like we're starting over again with them. But I don't want to make it seem like I'm upset that the Star-Telegram is bringing on new people, because I just met this week with some folks from the Star-Telegram, and like Harrison, who covers governmental stuff, absolutely is interested in, being a part of this community and doing the hard work of journalism in this community. And so I hope these people stick and can do some of the work that like Luke Ranker did while he was here. And you mentioned Nicole. And so we've lost those 2 people, and those were great losses for our community, because I think they did a really good job. So I'm again going to try to turn that into a little bit of a win.
Yeah. No, I think when I start looking at when we first started the 817 pod, I felt so excited to read the Star-Telegram because everyone had Luke, had Nicole, people who knew more about Fort Worth than I ever did. Now, like Harrison, I remember Harrison showing up to Fort Worth all starry-eyed and new, but now he's like all committed, but like to now feel like the more knowledgeable person in Fort Worth, and I think I'm more knowledgeable than the average Fort Worth journalist, scares me because I know very little, and I've only been here for 5 years or something like that. So it's like, it is a loss in the sense of how, I don't know, how in a way it's by not keeping them is a way of losing trust with news, and giving the people the information that they may not know. That's why I love you on the pod, in the sense of you'll remember something from another point that allows us to connect this to another point, and you lose that
when you don't have people with institutional knowledge and long-term understanding of things. I mean, not that we shouldn't be ready to embrace new ideas and new things. I think we absolutely should. But it's important to understand from whence we came as well.
Yeah. Now Harrison's a vet. So 3 years in, he's a vet.
He's going to have to help these newbies get their feet on the ground.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to go to my loss. My loss is, this is a win overall in my belt, like the overall approach. I think the loss here is the banter within the story, is that Tarrant County considers partnership on law enforcement training center rather than building from scratch. That part is a win because it would cost $35 million. That's part one, but then totaling a projected proposal of $48 million to do it from scratch. They're now going back to the drawing board, seeing if they can grow off of other centers. And it's just this big debate about wanting a shooting range and then like a circular track. And they basically are arguing about this will help with recruitment. And it's always a loss with me when your strategy is spend a lot of money and then people will come. I just think that never works. And the people who are pro spending this money on this new center, Manny Ramirez, Tim O'Hare, they're arguing, hey, I don't know how, literally fighting with Elisa Simmons around how this doesn't make sense to you. If we build this pretty track and a gun range, more people would want to be cops. And we're saying, well, show us the data. And they're like, if you don't see common sense, I don't know how to help you. Like, that's basically how the article went. And so to me, it's a loss that, one, poor, Elisa Simmons has to fight with this all on her own. But I just think that's a loss that you're going to try to build something and spend money with no evidence that this is a very expensive recruiting budget. How about you spend it on a communication budget or some other things that these stacked, they're also talking about how I just feel like those dollars can go somewhere where better spent. And I think that it's a loss that they're just throwing a fit.
The Fort Worth Police Department already has a very robust training facility. And I know that was part of the conversation as well, whether they would partner with existing training facilities and not have, multiple of the same things. There's a track out at that one. There's a gun range out at that one. When it was built with the idea that it would be a place where other organizations besides the Fort Worth Police Department could come and train. And it would be a money-making enterprise for the city of Fort Worth. And I'm not sure that has occurred. And I think that that's something that they should look into as well. So like you said, they are agreeing that they're going to put a pause on building the new, but they still seem to be very interested in building it. So my win actually has a tinge of a loss to it as well. So I'm really confusing things today. But I will say that I attended a meeting earlier this week with the Echo Heights and Stop 6 Environmental Coalition. And this is a group that is really activated and engaged about wanting to have a bigger say in the land use and the development that occurs in their community. And at the same time that this has come up, there has been a concerted effort by the city to do a more robust comprehensive planning effort than has been done in 2 decades. And so the city staff is kind of trying to travel 2 parallel roads at the same time with addressing the concerns specifically to this group and this neighborhood, and the fact that they're coming up on a comprehensive plan, which they are starting to do some engagement and outreach on. But the meeting that they had most recently, I think, wasn't able to kind of make the steps that needed to be made. But it was a great opportunity to put together a model that could be replicated in the efforts to do a robust comprehensive planning process going forward, because the questions and concerns that are being raised by the Echo Heights and Stop 6 Neighborhood Environmental Coalition are not just unique to their community. There are other communities in Fort Worth that probably have similar concerns. And because we have not done a robust overall comprehensive planning effort in 2 decades, the input from communities has not been as great as it can be. And so the win, I think, is that there is a group that's already wanting to do this, and the city has an opportunity to work alongside and hear the voices, as is the topic of this pod, who is heard, and whose opinions and ideas are embraced and funded and prioritized. And so I think that at this crossroads of having a very robust comprehensive planning effort already underway and a request for proposals by the Transportation Public Works Department for a transportation plan, a master transportation plan for the entire city, that these things all have a great possibility of engaging the community in a way that has not been done as robustly in the past and could end up with results that will be beneficial to all communities in Fort Worth.
I love it. No, and I know you're doing a lot more work with that with your daytime job. This is your weekend job. They kind of fit, but you know what I mean. Good job, and I'm excited to see how that goes. My win is basically, I don't know. You actually sent me this article. But the Chinese company Zhongchuang is moving their North American head office to Fort Worth to make EV parts. So Zhongchuang North America Inc., a leading provider of advanced technical solutions for electric vehicle market, is expanding their operations to Fort Worth. The Fort Worth Chamber said that last Tuesday. So the company has secured 55,000 square feet, plans to invest $21 million, and is expected to generate over 120 jobs by 2025. What's also a win about this is the collaboration between our economic development team at the city, but then the economic development partnership team at the chamber, working together to make something like this happen. A part of breaking up the chamber and creating like an economic nonprofit called the Development Partnership, whose CEO is Robert Allen. It allows them to recruit, identify talent, and get additional funds to make that happen. They're privately funded nonprofit whose mission is to develop economic opportunities through business development and attraction. From a business side, the reason why I'm a fan of this, throwing on my economic nerd hat would be this is a growing curve, obviously, EV development, but China exported less than 750,000 vehicles in total in 2019, which is roughly one half the number China has exported in only the first 5 months of the year. They are actually been moving the majority of these exports from China actually has been electric vehicles. So just a cool collaboration partnership to see just something happen on top of MP Materials, on top of Linear Labs. Can we be an electrification mecca due to our spot in the country? I think so. And I think we're adding global brands and names to the local environment. All right, beautiful people. Well, we did a lot of talking today, and hopefully you found something that connected with you. If you did, share with a friend, leave a rank. It's a challenging conversation as even just us as podcast hosts and us figuring out how do we advocate for things that we believe in? How do we advocate for things that are important to Fort Worth? How do we protect communities and allow things that are happening be good? I agree with you. This voice piece has been big, and I think it's you and I might have a different approach than other people, and even me and your approaches are very different. And I think on top of the voices, the storytellers of our city, just continue to double down on who you are and how you operate in this space. Some of you have very different styles than myself or an Ann does. And, I just think like how you're approaching it is needed, and a diverse messengers is good. But we should all look for those diverse thoughts and even support each other, because I get so worried about people get mad on how we fight and not realize that everyone has a different approach to changing systems. And we as progressives get maybe too caught up in fighting each other on things, on how we do it, because you would have liked someone to say it a different way, when I think getting voices to power is really hard. If you're going to do it in the street, or if you're going to do it sliding through an email and a colleague who knows someone who forwards you an introduction. I don't think anyone has it down to a science, but to me, hopefully this pod shows you that we're seeing people trying and advocating for those voices.
And my hope would just be that people try to tap the brakes on the getting mad part and just try to have the conversation and listen to what somebody else's perspective might be, because you might agree on more things than you thought you did.
Well, that's a perfect way to end this pod. We will see you guys next week. See you guys later.
See you next time.
Control your life, control your life.